Yeah, sure. Okay, so the idea is that yeah, we were discussing about the protection system. So in terms of protection system, what we see is that it has a very safe, a very well-defined limit in which your electrical parameters can fluctuate. And so it is true for voltage, it is true for current, it is true for frequency, it is true for the active power requirement, true for the reactive power requirement, and some other parameters as well. These are some of the most critical parameters which have to be in a particular band. And if there is a deviation beyond that permissible band, then there has to be some protection system which comes into play. Any idea out of all these parameters which I mentioned, which parameter is the most critical, most sensitive one, where the amount of fluctuation allowed is the least? Any idea? Anyone?
Sorry, sir. Can you repeat?
I'm saying that, like I said, that there are these different parameters: voltage, current, frequency, power demand, active power demand, reactive power demand. There are several electrical parameters in a system. So I'm saying that which is the most critical parameter, most sensitive one. If you disturb it by a little amount also, then the system is under problem. Any
Frequency,
idea which
sir.
is the most? Yeah, who said that?
Sir, Anvesh.
Anvesh, okay. Yeah, very correctly pointed out, Anvesh. Frequency is the most critical parameter actually in a power system. And if you look at it, I mean, the rated value of frequency in India is 50 hertz. In some other countries like US and all, it is 60 hertz. So globally, there are these two standards, either 50 hertz or 60 hertz. India follows the 50 hertz standard. And usually you will see the permissible amount of fluctuation allowed in frequency is usually plus minus 1% or plus minus 2% at the max. So if you are having a 50 hertz standard, you never want your frequency to go below 49 hertz or go above 51 hertz. So it's a very strict, tight band. And frequency is, like, a very critical parameter, and it has to be very closely monitored and kept in a very small range. For some other parameters like voltage, current, and others, you can have fluctuation up to 5, 10, 15% also. I mean, there are standards for that. Maybe we can discuss as we go ahead. But frequency is very, very, it has got a very narrow tolerance for the well-being of the system. So usually plus minus 2% is the max, plus minus 1% is what is preferred. So that is there. So that is about the protect. So by the way, one more thing. I mean, we didn't take the name of the equipment. So once this abnormal operation of the system is detected, what will happen is that there will be something known as a relay and a circuit breaker, which will come into picture. So relay is typically a intelligent device, so to say, which senses that there is a problem in the system, there is a fluctuation beyond the acceptable limit, and then that relay gives actuating signal, a control signal to the circuit breaker. And you might have heard the word circuit breaker has tripped. Circuit breaker trip ho gaya hai. So basically, a circuit breaker is nothing but a switch, but it is an automatic switch controlled by a control system, control circuitry. So the relay is the intelligent component, and it senses what is the abnormal situation. There are different types of relays, so you can have over voltage relay, under voltage relay, over current relay, over frequency relay. So there are different types of relays basically for different applications for sensing different types of fluctuations. And when it senses there is a fluctuation from the normal condition, then it sends a signal to the circuit breaker, which trips, and the protection system becomes activated, you can say, and the normal functioning of the circuit is stopped to prevent the damage or damage to both the equipment and the people who are around there. So that is the protection system in brief. We will look at this in more detail as we go ahead in our class. And then, as you can see in our discussion so far, also we have been talking about some type of control, and control is also a very critical part of any system per se, any industrial system, even mechanical or electrical. Every sort of technological system needs to have a very nice control mechanism, because you need to you need the operation in a defined region. So there are control things, control mechanisms, like something known as SCADA, which you might have heard about, very popular term. So that is one very popular way of doing it. And so SCADA is something which we will be looking at in detail, and there will be some other concepts. This is just the overview. I mean, we are just talking right now, just giving you a flavor of the course. So you have electrical power generation, protection, and control. These three aspects of basically hydropower stations, and in particular small hydropower stations, that we'll be looking at. So this is the details of the course in terms of what exactly we are going to cover. So we will be starting with the generators, the types, characteristics, and testing of AC generators. Then we will look at the generators in somewhat more detail, sizing and specification of single and three-phase. Mainly we'll be focusing on three-phase generators because that is what is practically used. Single-phase generators are there in theory, but not existent as such practically, except for the small generator which you have at your home in terms of the backup supply, which people used to have earlier, now not so popular. Then we'll look at power factor and its correction methodologies, excitation systems, electromechanical and digital governor, electronic load controller. So these first 4 points, I'll not go into the details, we'll go as we go ahead in the class. These first 4 are basically the electrical power generation part. So electrical power generation is a major chunk of this course, and as you can see, it will cover roughly 20 lectures. Almost half of the course will be focused on these aspects which are related to electrical power generation. The remaining half, I mean, it's not like bifurcated clearly that way, but yeah, this is 5, 6, 7, 8. These are protection and control together. So because whenever we see, I mean, even if we were discussing right now as a layman also, you see when we are talking about protection, there is always control which is involved. So protection system will have a control mechanism which will sense the value of a particular variable and compare it with the standard value, and accordingly, if there is a mismatch, there is an error, it will send an actuating signal to the circuit breaker to trip or some other type of protection mechanism to come into the picture. So that's why protection and control always go hand in hand, and that's why this 5, 6, 7, 8, as you can see, these are primarily related to the protection and control part, and that is almost another half of this course. So half will be focused on generation and another half on protection and control. There are some suggested books, but I guess, I mean, it will be difficult for you now. So, I mean, because library is also not in access and things like that. So I will be sharing with you the class notes in terms of PDF. I'll be extracting from different books and sharing it with you from time to time. If you're interested, you can still, I mean, or if you have access to one of these books, that's also good. Otherwise, also, if you don't have access to these books, then also no need to worry. I mean, I'll be providing you the lecture notes in form of PDF. Okay. So this is just an overview of this course. Any questions you have? Anyone? Any query? Any question? Any suggestion?
No, sir.
Pronit, anything you want to say? Pronit, you are able to hear me?
So no, sir, no doubts.
Okay. Kashif, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, I'm able to hear you.
Any questions you have? Anything to ask or
No
suggest?
doubts yet, sir. It's fine by me.
Okay. Okay. Good. So with this overview of the course and this background, let's actually go into the course material starting. So today we'll start with hydroelectric generator basics. Okay, and so we'll start with this and look at some of the basic concepts to start with. So as I mentioned, primarily, and as I mean, I think Harshvardhan also pointed out, is that primarily these generators are basically AC generators, and in AC also they are synchronous generators. Okay. So whenever we are saying about this hydroelectric generator, it's basically a AC synchronous generator. And we'll look at the basics first, and then we'll go to advanced concepts. So as it says here, the hydroelectric generators have been installed at different locations from the turn of the previous century. So from the starting of the 20th century, around that time. So as you might be aware, around 1880s or so, electrical power started being manufactured at generated at the industrial scale and being distributed to different households and all. So that was around 1880s or something. So since now more than almost one century, almost close to 1.5 century, electrical power has been there in commercial use, industrial use, and also domestic use. So it all started with hydroelectric generators, interestingly. I mean, the thermal power plants, they came later. Initially also it was the hydroelectric generators. And their ratings, power rating will range from few kilowatts to several hundred megawatts even. And so any of the big power plants you know in India, which are hydroelectric based?
Sir, NHPC.
Yeah, NHPC is a company. Okay, so NHPC, National Hydropower Corporation, is a company which is owning different hydropower plants. Any particular hydropower plants which you know, the hydropower station which you are aware about?
Sir, in Hirakud, I think it is hydroelectric.
Correct. Pranit, is that you? No, Anvesh.
Yes, sir. Pranit.
Okay, Anvesh. Okay. Yeah,
And
Hirakud
one
is
more,
one
sir.
example. Yeah.
One more, sir, Chipilma, that is near to our home place only.
Where is that?
Chipilma, sir.
Yeah,
So,
Chipil. I mean, which is a nearest bigger place which I can.
Sambalpur, sir.
Okay. Sambalpur. Okay, okay, okay. So Sambalpur, Hirakud is also near Sambalpur only, right?
Yes, sir, right, sir.
Okay, okay. So Chipilpai is on the same river, Mahanadi, or another?
Same river, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay. And any other names you have heard about? Udit?
The THDC?
THDC is another company, Tehri Hydro Development Corporation, and so as you know, Tehri is a very well-known project on Ganga River. So are you from Uttarakhand, Udit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, good. Where are you? Where in Uttarakhand are you from?
Sir, it's 20 kilometers from Roorkee only. Luxor.
Luxor. I know. Almost 17 kilometers only. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Yeah. So a few of you have given some names, but and yeah. By the way, any one of you has ever visited a hydropower station?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No. Okay. Okay. Anyways, so maybe once you come back here, we can have a visit because there are a lot of hydropower plants around Roorkee also. I mean, nearby, the nearest big one is in Haridwar. I mean, Udit must be knowing Chila Power Station. So
Yes, sir.
this is also I mean a significant one. I think around 240 megawatt or something is the capacity. I mean, you can check it out. So and then near Dehradun also Dak Patthar, there are different hydropower plants which are there. Couple of 2-3 there on Yamuna River. There is Chibro is there, then Khodri, and lot of there are there on the Yamuna River. So yeah, so maybe we can visit sometime. So a lot of hydroelectric generators, especially you'll see mostly where there is a mountainous terrain. There it's easier to build because it gives a natural profile for having the reservoir. So large hydropower stations are that way, and then there are small hydropower stations also. So you are aware about this classification between large and small hydropower?
No, sir.
Anyone? Any idea?
Sir, it's about like power generation in megawatt, means how
Right.
classification is based upon this. Yes, sir.
Correct. So what is the classifying limit? Any idea?
Sir, I think below 500 kilowatt, it comes under the mini like something, sir. I cannot recall at the moment, but something like that.
Something along those lines. So usually below 500 kilowatt, they call it as micro hydro, and now they are also talking about pico hydro and all, very small power plants. Then 500 kilowatt to 2 megawatt, they call it as mini hydro. Then 2 megawatt to 25 megawatt is a small hydro, and beyond 25 megawatt is a large hydro. That is the usual classification which they talk about. So, and what is the primary difference now? If you have a large hydro and if you have a small or mini or micro hydro, what is the primary difference? Any idea?
Sir, the layout.
Layout in terms of what? What is the main difference in the layout?
Sir, the working floor area and all the equipment.
No, that is all okay. Okay, it will, if it's a smaller one, so proportionately small it will be there. But what is the one primary feature which is different in a large hydro thing and which is not there in a small hydro power plant or mini or micro? And that is why the main difference. If you know, I mean, you might be aware that many of the standard bodies, government organizations, and all, they count small hydro, anything up to small hydro range as renewable energy generation, whereas large hydro is counted separately. It's not in the bracket of renewable energy, conventional renewable energy. So there is one primary difference why that is there. Kashif, any idea?
Sir, it might be about the reservoir capacity.
Exactly, the reservoir basically actually. So the large hydro power plant will always, you'll see it will have a huge dam type structure behind which there is a huge reservoir. So that is a large hydro. And this thing is missing in a small hydro power plant. So small hydro will never have that type of huge dam type reservoir type structure. It will have a small, sort of barricading wall type of thing, diversion weir we call it, and a small pondage type of thing might be there, but not like a huge reservoir. So that is the main difference actually, and that's why, I mean, the large hydro, though it's also a renewable type of source because it is generating electricity from water, but because there is a very huge catchment area, huge reservoir which is created, which will have a very significant environmental impact. Like Udit might be aware, others might also be aware, when Tehri Dam was being constructed, there was a lot of protest going on because Tehri city and a lot of other area and forest and all those were to be submerged. So there was a lot of protest and things like that. So that's why usually the larger hydro, the big hydro power plants with huge reservoir thing, they are kept in a separate category because of the environmental impact which they create. Whereas this small hydro, anything up to the small hydro range, that will not have a huge reservoir, so that environmental impact, damaging impact is not there. And that's why this is put in under the category of renewable energy. So solar PV, wind, biomass, and small hydro, they are in one category together because of the absence of the environmental impact as such, or I mean not that huge environmental impact. Whereas large hydro is having a significant environmental impact. So yeah, so that is about the basic idea between small hydro and large hydro. And accordingly, if you see everything, I mean, from few kilowatts will be a pico hydro power plant, whereas several hundred megawatts will be a large hydro power plant. So entire range is there. Now, starting with the hydroelectric generator basics, these are basically salient pole machines. I'll come to the terminology in a little while. So there are two types of things. One is the salient pole, another is a cylindrical rotor machine. So how it is happening, let me first look at a figure and then let me explain you. So this is basically a rotor. So every generator has got two components. One is the rotating component, which is known as a rotor, and another is the stationary component, which is known as the stator. So I'll show you a picture so that you can relate to it, and then we'll discuss. So this is a cutaway section of a generator. This is not a hydro generator. This is just a conventional generator. But yeah, this is a cutaway section. So here in this figure, if you see this entire thing, this one, there is this cylindrical type of thing in between, and there is this rod type thing coming out. So this thing is the rotor, and this will rotate when the machine operates. And this rotor, as you see, is encased in a encasing like this. So here it has been cut for view, so it will be completely closed encasing. So it is closed in an encasing. So this encasing part is the stationary part, and that is known as the stator. And this in between the cylindrical part, which will actually rotate as the machine operates, is known as the rotor. So the generator has got these two primary components. One is the rotating component, rotor. Another is the stationary component in which the rotor is housed, and that is known as the stationary one is known as the stator. Any question or confusion in this thing?
No, sir.
Okay, this is very fundamental. Okay. Now this rotor, actually the rotating thing, how it rotates, I mean how it is designed, depending upon that there is two classifications which is being talked about here. The rotor can be of two types. One is the salient pole rotor, or accordingly the machine having the salient pole rotor is known as a salient pole machine, and another is the cylindrical rotor machine. And as it says here, the hydroelectric generators are typically salient pole machines, whereas the ones which are used in fossil fuel plants, that means coal-based power plant or nuclear power plant even, or you have your gas-based power plant, all those will be cylindrical rotor machines. And now, first of all, let's look at what is this salient pole and this thing. I mean, and the cylindrical rotor. So this is what the cylindrical rotor looks like. If you see the the cross section of this thing, this is like a perfect. The cross section will be a circular thing. So this is, you can say, the cross sectional view, the front view, and overall it is a cylinder, perfect cylinder. That is the rotor. So that this is known as a cylindrical rotor, or also known as a non-salient rotor. What is the meaning of the word salient? I mean, just the dictionary meaning. Any idea? The word salient.
Few surface.
Key feature, something like.
Yeah, the key feature or the most prominent feature. So non-salient means because no portion of rotor is especially prominent. I mean, the entire profile of the rotor is similar. There is nothing which is salient and which is not salient. So that's why another name is non-salient and one name is the cylindrical rotor. The other type of rotor is a salient pole rotor, which is like this, if you see. So here, if you see you can say the core of the rotor is still cylindrical, but on that there are these protruding poles which are placed, alternate north and south. So one north pole, then south pole, north and south. As we know, magnets always they will have north and south poles. So there is an alternating polarity pole which is placed north or south, but the pole is protruding out, as you can see. So there is a cylindrical profile in between, and each pole is protruding out, so to say. So these are the salient poles. Now these are the prominent things. I don't know, because if you just visualize, if you put this inside a stator like this, what you'll see, in fact, this is also a salient pole rotor only, this figure. So what you'll see is that these poles are protruding out. They are closer to the stator. So the air gap between the salient pole rotor and your stator is the air gap is varying. The air gap is less where the pole piece is there, and then in between there is a gap where the air gap is more. Then another rotor, again the air gap is less. So that is the salient pole rotor, and this type of design is known as the saliency. And whereas the cylindrical rotor, the air gap is uniform. The air gap does not change. This has got implications on the performance of the machine. Maybe we'll not go so much into mathematical details, but we will at least touch it conceptually. So, so this has got effects. I mean, you can say some type of variation on the performance of the machine. So usually what we do is that when we analyze the operation of a generator, we take this as the base case, the cylindrical rotor or non-salient rotor, because it is easy to analyze. The air gap is uniform. So the mathematical analysis and things are easier here. So this forms the base case of a generator, and the effect of saliency, or this effect of having a salient poles, is accounted for by taking a separate term in the mathematical analysis. Maybe we'll look at just the overview, not so much into detail, but right now we are just understanding the concept and the terminology. So this is how a salient pole rotor looks like. Okay, I mean, just a picture of it. And so these are the poles, as you see. These are the poles, the ones which you can see here. So this is an 8-pole rotor. 8 of these protruding poles are there. And if you see here, there is a winding. There is a wire which is a coil, a conducting element, which is wound around the pole shoe. So this thing is known as the pole shoe, the pole which is protruding out. So this wire which is wound, this is the winding. So for a salient pole rotor, the winding is wound around the pole shoe. Whereas in this, we don't have a picture, but you can still understand here, is that here the winding is placed in these slots. So in the rotor periphery, there are some slots. So these are actually the slots which are there, and the winding is placed like this. So it will be wound like this along the periphery. And so that's why if you look at the front view of this thing, now you can see. So this is the periphery of the rotor, and these are the slots which I'm talking about. These are the slots on the rotor. So you will have the winding going out from one side and going in the next side. And this is the symbol which we use. The dot indicates it is going out of the plane of the paper like this. And here the cross indicates going inside the plane of the paper. So going from here to here. That's how the winding has been wound. And if any one of you recalls maybe your class 12th physics basics, there was something known as the Fleming's right-hand rule.
Yes, sir.
You recall the name at least?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
What was that? Anyone can say? There was some left-hand rule, right-hand rule. People used to get confused which one to use where. So,
Sir, Fleming's left-hand rule.
now I'm talking about right-hand rule.
Fleming's left-hand rule.
That is left-hand.
Right.
I'm not talking about that.
Force
I'm talking about the right-hand
the
rule
thumb.
right now.
Okay, okay. This one.
Yeah, right.
Pointing downward and pointing upward.
Good. Yeah, very correct. Harshvardhan, how you have good knowledge about electrical concepts? You did some internship or something? How do you? I mean, a lot of things you are answering actually. That's nice.
Sir, actually, I did my internship at DRDO, sir.
Very good. That's nice. So
There I get
during your BTech
Yes,
third
Sir,
year.
during my bachelor. Yeah, during my bachelor in third year, sir.
Okay. So there you learned about these electrical components as well.
Yes, sir. We were learning about the cryo coolers,
Okay.
which are used in the missiles and the night vision camera systems. So I have
Right,
the
right.
idea of electrical equipment, sir.
No, that's very good. Very good. Actually, that's very appreciated because if you look at how the industry also works, it is always interdisciplinary. It's not
Yes,
that
sir.
someone is from mechanical background, so they'll
Yes,
not know
sir.
anything about electrical or vice versa. It's better to
Yes.
have some basic working knowledge of all these systems.
There are no constraints, sir. Actually, if you are from mechanical,
Exactly.
it's not necessary you get to work only in mechanical field.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. So even in hydro power plants also, we keep visiting some of these power plants around Roorkee here for some consultancy projects and all. And we see that even the executive engineers and all which are there, if someone is from electrical background, they also have a very good knowledge about mechanical concepts and vice versa. So yeah, that is very true. It's always there in industry. Yeah. So this is the right hand rule which I'm talking about here. So if you see, if you put your fingers curling in the direction of the winding here. So as I said, dot indicates coming out of the plane of the paper and cross indicates going in the plane of the paper. So it is like this, right? So if you put your fingers curling along this winding, then the direction of the thumb is where the direction of the magnetic field is there. Okay, so that is the idea, and that's why this is the arrow is shown here. So the North Pole is in this direction and South is here. So this is the basic concept of an electromagnet, right? So whenever you have current flowing in a coil, that will generate a magnetic field, and the direction of the magnetic field is given by the Fleming's right-hand rule. Okay, so you have your fingers going in the direction of the current, and your the thumb will point in the direction of the magnetic field which will be generated. So that is the idea here. So this is very simple. I mean, you have just very simple analysis in this case, and whereas here things will be more complicated. We'll look at that later. So depending upon which type of rotor construction is there, whether it is cylindrical rotor or it is a salient pole rotor, accordingly you have the different types of generators. Now we can read this paragraph. Now it says that hydroelectric generators are salient pole machines. So hydroelectric generators are always, invariably, they are just having this salient type construction. In contrast to the cylindrical rotor machines commonly used at fossil fuel plants. So the cylindrical rotor machines are typically used in coal-based or thermal power plants, which operate at speeds up to 3600 RPM. So this is about the cylindrical rotor machines. The cylindrical rotor machines can have a very high speed, up to 3600 RPM. Whereas salient pole generators have relatively slow operating speeds in the range of 80 to 1000 RPM. That is the range. So these salient pole rotors they have a very small operating speed in the range of 80 to 1000 RPM. And as you can understand, what might be the reason for that? Why the difference in speed? This has got to do something with the mechanical concepts. So you can make a guess.
Sir, I think it produces more torque.
Which one?
The cylindrical.
Yeah, not. It can sustain more torque. You can say it can sustain more torque. The structural stability will be, higher. It will be more robust. So if you run a cylindrical rotor at 3600 RPM also, then also it is robust and not much structural strain is developed in the system. But if you have this type of salient pole rotor, as you can understand also, and we will look, briefly we'll look at the construction also. How it is done is that the core is still cylindrical, and on top of that you are fixing this particular salient poles. So as you can understand, this is not really a very rigid structure in terms of the structural stability. So if you start rotating this guy at a very high speed, there will be a much higher strain or stress which will be developed in these particular shoe poles, and will not be really sustainable for a very long duration. Maybe it can have a mechanical damage very early. So that's why this can't sustain those high torques. Those high torques can be sustained in this type of a thing, and that's why for higher RPMs, when you have 3000 or 3600 RPM up to that range, you can use a cylindrical rotor. And salient pole rotor will have a limit always. Salient pole rotor can't be used above 1000 RPM. So salient pole rotor is good in this range, from as low as 80 RPM to up to 1000 RPM, and for higher RPMs, above 1000 RPM, 1500, 1800, in that order, 3000, 3600, in those range, you can have a cylindrical rotor. So it has got to do with the structural stability of the thing. Nothing electrical here. This is just the structural stability. Okay, and and this number of poles, we'll look at that, how we define. So the number of poles is also different. Hydroelectric generators typically are designed with 10 to 120 rotor field poles, and there's a reasoning behind that. We'll come to that gradually as we go. Okay, so this we have already covered. Salient means protruding or sticking out, and so salient pole we have seen, and non-salient pole is the cylindrical one, which is this one. So this is there. Okay, before we move ahead, because now we'll be going something related to operations and all. So any questions so far?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, so just this brief thing we'll touch upon, and then maybe we can end today's class. So again, if you recall your basic physics from class 12th, you can recall basically is that any type of this electrical machine where there is either it is a motor taking electrical power and converting to mechanical output, or a generator which is taking mechanical power and converting to electrical output. The basic thing is that basically there are two types of magnetic fields which are interacting. And whenever there is an interaction between two magnetic fields, there is a force. You can recall, right? If you recall class 12 physics, some basic ideas, you can recall that if there is a magnetic field, and if you put a current carrying coil in that magnetic field, what will happen? Now this current carrying coil will generate its own magnetic field, and there is an already existing magnetic field. Okay, so let me just connect this guy.
Mutual induction.
Sorry?
So you were saying about the mutual induction, sir.
Yeah, very correct. So let me just connect this thing. It will help. Yeah, so what I'm saying here is that basically something like this. Hopefully it will be visible to you. So you can see this, right? So let's say this is the North Pole and this is the South Pole, the two poles of a magnet, and you have, so the electric field is, the magnetic field is from North Pole to South Pole, like that. The lines of magnetic field. So now let's say I put a coil here in between. And so these are the ones which I drew earlier. These are the existing electric magnetic lines of force due to the north-south magnet which we are having here. Now if I put this type of coil here, and let's say it is carrying current in this direction. Again, if you apply your right hand rule, so if you look at this, it is going like this, the current is going in this direction, right? We are saying like that. So it will have a north pole generated this side and south pole generated this side. The magnetic field of the coil. Okay. And as we know, north and south will attract and north and south will attract. So this will just remain like this. But let's say if the current direction is reversed. So, okay, let me draw another one. This is becoming very messy. So, okay, that I think. Okay, so you have north again here for this stationary magnet and south here. So the magnetic lines of force again are here like this. And now the coil which I put, let's say that is having a current in an opposite direction. So earlier it was anti-clockwise, now we are saying that it is clockwise. So again, if you now curl your fingers along the clockwise direction, what you'll see is that now this magnetic field will be in opposite direction. North of this magnetic field will be here, south will be here. And this north and north, they will repel, south and south will repel. So it will create a force which will cause this particular coil to turn in such a way that it aligns as per the top figure. Okay, so that is a basic concept. The entire electrical machines are working on this fundamental concept. So whenever there are two magnetic fields, one is a stationary magnetic field, another is a current carrying coil which can move. Whenever you place them together, I mean, there is a stator, as I said, the stationary magnetic field having a stator, and if you are putting a rotating magnetic field in there, so these two magnetic fields will always try to align in such a way that north and south are aligned together. Okay, so this is the basic concept. And okay, so maybe we'll stop here because I think it is 10:55, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 56. Okay. Okay, so this is just basic introduction. We'll continue this in the next class. Any question finally? Any last word anyone wants to have? Any question or doubt?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay,
No,
so
sir.
we'll end here. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, Kashif, anything you want to say?
No, sir. It's good. I'm listening.
Okay. Anvesh?
Sir, clear, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll meet in the next class.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.